Hey, this is John Bollinger with Premier Guitar. Today we're taking a first look at not one, not two, but three new Telecasters from Fender. And this is part of their Vintera series. The Vintera series is a very ambitious series. It covers a total of 15 new instruments, but these instruments are all an homage to classic Fenders of the past. So this is where it all started. The original Telecaster, which is the first commercially successful solid body guitar ever made. In 1950, they came out with the Broadcaster. Then, as you know, Gretsch sued them over the name, and they came up with the Telecaster. It's a 25.5 scale. Originally, they cost $169, which in 1950, that's the equivalent of $1,792 a day. So you can see that the prices are actually kind of going down, which is remarkable. This guitar, okay, if it was the 1950s, they really got it very close. We'll start first with the neck. The neck is a nice, fat maple one piece. And I think the original ones were so fat because originally, they didn't even have a truss rod. So I think they're a little bit thicker just to kind of give you that stability. Then, of course, when they got in the full production models, they had truss rods, but they kind of kept that fatter feel. And they got smaller in time, but that's where it started. And it's a comfortable neck. It's a 7.25 radius, which is a little small for some modern players, but luckily Fender offers a Vintera modified model as well, which offers a flatter radius. But these are, because of the 7.25 radius, bending's going to feel a little bit different, but guitar playing was different back then. People didn't bend so much, they more slid into things. It was more of a sliding time than a bending time, and thicker strings anyway. But it's a comfortable neck. Don't let this whole fat neck 7.25 radius throw you. It is something you could really get used to. And most importantly, it sounds great. So a big part of this guitar sounding so great are these pickups. And they painstakingly went about reproducing the pickups that you would find in the 50s. On the bridge, where I've been spending most of the time, it's an Alnico 3 magnet, just like they used in the original Broadcaster. And to me, the pickups in the 50s are a little bit, the bridge pickups are a little sweeter, less bitey than the 60s, but we'll do a little taste test later on. But I mean, don't get me wrong, it's snarly, but more than anything, it's got that classic Tele kind of twang and bite, but it's not unpleasant. So in the neck, you've got that Alnico 2 magnet, which gives you that classic blackguard Tele tone like you hear on Jimmy Bryant records. Between the two, it's a kind of a beautiful blend. So the other ingredients, you've got an alder body, which is kind of a nice, comfortable weight. Now this comes in red, which would have been a special order back in the day. Fender offered custom colors, but they didn't really become part of the standard catalog, I think, until the 60s, when, you know, it got a little more groovy and colors got a little more groovy. But this would have been a classic or a special order, which makes them very rare today, because a lot of, you know, people just didn't order a lot of special things. But another detail I like is you can see these knobs are the rounded knobs that you'd find exclusively in the 50s or back in the late 40s with their lap steels. It's funny, I bought this in a pawn shop in Ventura, California about 15 years ago for 70 bucks. And these knobs alone are worth like 370. So that worked out all right. But I love that they have that attention to detail. The bridge with these 3 brass rollers is just what you'd have back in the day. And it's a huge part of this tone. I mean, a Tele would not sound like a Tele without this. And as primitive as this might seem, you know, the intonation is actually really solid. You know, some Tele fanatics have a way of kind of bending them to do whatever, but it just shows Leo Fender's genius. All in all, this is a really impressive reproduction. Even you've got the single string tree right there, the round one. Like if you look at my old 55, that's what they are using back in the day. The tuners, again, like on this 55, are really similar. So they really nailed it. You got to hand it to them. And it's a difficult task reproducing a vintage guitar because I played a lot of them and none of them are the same. They all kind of have their own. Number one, humans cut these out of wood, you know, just using, you know, saws. So there's going to be some difference there. And also you add in 60 years of wear and tear, and that changes things. There's actually an attrition in necks and things like that. So they had a difficult task of finding what is the quintessential 50s Tele, but this does seem to have all the characteristics. Now let's do a little compare and contrast to the 60s. Let's set the Wayback Machine to 1960 whatever and try the next one. So now we're in the swinging 60s and Fender's made some cool changes. Number one, you've probably noticed the fingerboard, which is rosewood. So in 1959 they introduced a slab, and then later went down to a thinner chunk of rosewood. Tone's going to be a little bit different, but the tone's also going to be different for some other factors we'll get into later. But while we're talking about the neck is kind of a more modern feeling C. It's not as chunky as the other one, but this is something that's more familiar to modern players. Still a 7.25 radius, but a really comfortable feeling guitar. Still like the 59, it's a 21 vintage style frets, but again, very, very comfortable. Now, they offer the 60s in alder or ash. This one is alder. But that difference you're hearing right there, I think is mainly the pickups. The 60s and the 50s pickups really do have some considerable differences. So in the 50s, the pickups were using Alnico 3s and 2s. These are using Alnico 5 magnets across the board. But wait, there's more. You might notice that these are staggered pole pieces, whereas the 50s are just flat. And that's going to give you a different tone. And to me, it's more bitey. Just spanky, right? I mean, whoo, man. And in the neck, I love that tone. Now, that's my favorite part. The Bigsby on this thing is just such a treat. beyond the fretboard, the neck, and the pickups, some aesthetic differences are, you might notice the 3-ply pickguard that they went to. The knobs are now flat on top rather than the rounded. And of course, this Bigsby bridge is different. And it's interesting, this alder body, it's really got a kind of an equal low, mid, and high tone to it. It just seems so well balanced. They also offer this in ash, and I think the ash is going to be a little more chimey in the high ends. You might notice the string tree is now gone to the more modern string tree like that you'd see introduced in the 60s, like my old 66. Now here's the one thing I would have done differently is in the 60s, for a very brief period, they had these transitional logos that were gold with black outline. And I think they kind of missed an opportunity because they used the same on their 50s Tele and their 50s Tele and their 60s Tele. I figured, like, what the hell? You had this little window where you had that transitional logo. It would have been cool if they did it, but maybe on the next batch, or maybe it's a stupid idea. I know that's some next level nerddom, but you get the idea. Now we say we set the Wayback Machine to the 1970s and try out that. So now we're in the swinging 70s, and this to me is always going to be like Keith Richards. Now I know that his 52 Blackguard with the humbucker in the neck is the one that Keith is best known for, but he spent a lot of time on this guitar, and I'm not sure if Fender was inspired by his, putting a humbucker in his, or how it happened, but in the 70s, Fender wanted to jump into the humbucker game, and so they had Seth Lever, who stolen from Gibson, start doing their humbuckers. And it's kind of similar today. Tim Shaw, who used to be with Gibson back in the 80s, making their humbuckers in those kind of cool 80s eras, is now working for Fender. So there's a cyclical nature to, to this guitardom. But this is, you can see what they're going for. Very Les Paul type traits. You've got the 2 tones, 2 volumes down there like on a Les Paul. You have the 3-way switch up there like on a Les Paul. Now the original wide range pickups, Seth Lever wanted a humbucker, but he wanted it closer to the single coil characteristics. So you could switch between the two without a huge tonal difference, without having to jack with your amp. So you're going to get a little more clarity. And they were built differently. Now, in full disclosure, this, Fender came out with it in the 70s, like in this. I think this is like a 73, my old deluxe. But when they came out with then they reintroduced it a while ago, and they weren't making them the same way. And they're still not making them the same way, but they sound closer. This is this has a bar in it, like a more conventional Gibson type humbucker. But it sounds, they voiced it more like the original wide range. So why don't we start on that neck, and I'll kind of show you. We'll do a little taste test for funsies. So you can see we're a humbucker, but not a huge difference in volume, and I think there's a lot of clarity there that you wouldn't see with a conventional humbucker. But just for funsies, let's compare it to an actual wide range from the 70s. And you be the judge. I'm not even going to say anything. I'm just going to play it and you can just see. So draw your own conclusions, but I will say this. This neck is really similar, that they nailed that neck. It feels like the same, it feels identical to that one. And it's still that 7.25 radius, 21, vintage style frets, but really comfortable. They got away from the brass, but the tone of this thing is just pure telly. Now, some other interesting differences. You can see now the truss rod is this bullet type, introduced back in the day. So that's a cool change. And here's where I said how there were some changes that I don't think are improvements in the 70s. They changed tuners, and I kind of like the old classic ones better. But at least these ones they still have that hole in the middle, which is like a really brilliant design. You stick cut your string, stick it down there, and you've really got a locker. It works really well. Now later on, they even got away from that, which I don't like. I like that they went with that, that they kept it with the hole in the center. 2-string trees, which I don't know. I'm not sure why it was needed, but apparently it was, and it seems to work well. The thing I don't like about that bullet right there, it makes it behind the neck. To me, it feels a little bit awkward compared to the other one, but it still works fine. So in the 70s, they went with a 3-bolt neck. I love the fact that going with the whole kind of time machine, they copped it. I mean, they copped all of it. And it looks, it looks and feels just like the real deal. So what do you say for fun? We're going to just play the same thing on all 3 guitars, and you can kind of hear how they compare. So a true compare and contrast. So all 3 of these guitars are hecho in Mexico, so they're an absolute bargain, going between $899 and then all the way up to $1,049.99 for this one with the Bigsby. So the extra expense is probably there. A little bit more money for the ash body, I think, but all in all, like I said, compared to the initial prices of Fender back in the day, even at $169, I think what they were, it's a bargain. My personal favorite is this one, probably just because of the Bigsby. Just love it. But I love all 3. Good on you, Fender. So to read the full written review, go to premierguitar.com. While you're online, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Instagram, Twitter, all that jazz. Go to the PG site, poke around there for endless hours of guitar geekery. And as far as guitar geekery goes, have the magazine sent straight to your home. Let your mail delivery person know just what kind of a guitar nerd you are. This is John Bollinger. Till next time.